Hey everyone. So crafting in this game is something that I would say quite a lot of people have asked me about, either for an explanation or just to share my thoughts on how I craft and how I make my items. So I thought I should just quickly make a standalone crafting guide. A lot of this was in my full explanation of last epoch, but I've added some bits, changed some bits, and decided to put a standalone video just so you can have it all in one place in a really easy way to watch. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope this answers all your question about crafting. If you have any more, just please let me know. So crafting in this game works on a forging potential basis. If we look at this spear has 35 forging potential. There's two prefixes, two suffixes, just like PoE, except there's only two instead of three. And every single stat can be itemized. So as you can see, the critical strike multiplier on this spear is tier 1. This is backwards. Tier 1 is a bottom roll, while for example, tier 6 and even tier 7 are top rolls. As you can see, this item is purple, and as you can see, the physical damage roll is purple. What this means is this is an exalted item. These can only be found in endgame, and the best rolls, tier 6 and tier 7, have to be dropped off of an enemy. If we look at the current belts my character is using, as you can see, I have one tier 6 roll and then all tier 5 rolls. This is effectively the best you can do on an item, and to be able to achieve something like this, you would need a base to craft off of that you find in late game. As I mentioned, all stats in this game are shards. So what I mean by that is this critical strike multiplier is a critical strike multiplier shard. If I wanted to make this higher, if I got this item and I was sad that the crit multi was lower, well, I could specifically choose to upgrade the critical strike multiplier to a higher tier if I had a critical strike multiplier shard already. You will find plenty of these just for running around, and you can even destroy items with runes of shattering to get more of each shard to be able to put on your item. So in this case, I would need a multiplier shard, which I have 19 of from everything I've done. And it's as simple as just hitting the button. It would use 1 to 10 forging potential. It's random. I have 35 in total, and it'll upgrade us to tier 2. And there's sometimes a chance that we get super lucky and get a crit, which means it'll upgrade either another stat randomly or the same stat twice. So this could have turned to tier 3. And there are different modifiers that we can use to change how the outcome goes. So there I use a Glyph of Hope. This just has a 25% chance that I don't use any potential. We got lucky there and only used 2. But for example, if the game rolled that I would have used 10 and the Glyph of Hope procced, that means we would have gotten a free click that would have upgraded our weapon with no downsides. There's also Glyphs of Chaos. What this does is it will upgrade it to tier 3, but it'll re-roll it out of the possible pool of all prefixes for the weapon. One nice thing is if you want to know, hey, what are the prefixes that can go on a spear? If I click view materials and look at prefixes, everything that shows up here are specifically the prefixes that are relevant to the item I'm currently using in my crafting interface. If I look at the suffixes, these are all the suffixes that can only roll on this spear. So when we use this Glyph of Chaos, we will get a random one of these. As you can see, we got tier 3 lightning damage. There's also Glyph of Order, which is an upgrade, but forcing the item to stay within its roll. So for example, as you can see here, it's 94% out of 70 to 96. If I didn't care about the forging potential, I just wanted it to not low roll when I re-rolled it, I could do this and forcefully make it stay close to max roll. And lastly, which isn't really relevant till late game, are Glyphs of Despair. These allow you to upgrade something, but it gives you a chance to, I'm going to use PoE terminology here, fracture the item. So if we get lucky here, there we go. It sealed the prefix. What that does is it didn't upgrade it, but it simply moved it off of the item, but it's still there, right? The 94% lightning damage is still on the item, but it frees up a prefix. So now in this empty prefix, I could put whatever I want, right? Whether it's melee critical strike chance or melee lightning damage or any other stat. So now I can have 3 prefixes on this spear. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Who knows? Depends on your item. To complement all that, we also have runes. These don't modify what happens to the craft. These completely change your item. So for example, I have a helmet here with +1 to Death Seal. If I wanted to put Death Seal on my helmet, what I could do is I can go look in the world, find items with Death Seal on them, and I could use a Rune of Shattering to destroy the item and gain random shards based on the stats that the item has. What I could do is I could instead use a Rune of Removal. This is effectively a null orb, but it just guarantees I always get shards. If I use a Shattering, there was a chance that I get the level of Death Seal. If I use a Rune of Removal and it hits the Death Seal, then I guarantee that I get those shards. Versus a Rune of Shattering where it's random. As you can see, I didn't actually get any Death Seal shards. We also have Runes of Refinement. This is a Divine Orb where it just re-rolls all of the numbers on the weapon. We have Rune of Discovery, which will just randomly fill my open slots with random stats. Rune of Shaping, which re-rolls the implicit, is like a Blessed Orb. The Rune of Ascendance, which is a Ancient Orb, which will turn this into a unique item. And lastly, honestly, the most powerful one, due to what it can do endgame, the Rune of Creation, which is just a mirror from PoE, where I can just make a duplicate of whatever I use it on. Crafting this game, hopefully for my explanation, is pretty straightforward, pretty simple to understand. You just find a good base and then you upgrade what you want. You try to craft it in a few certain ways, but it's not infinite like PoE. It is pretty much fully deterministic, but you cannot infinitely tinker something until you get exactly what you want, which doesn't make it as open-ended as PoE is, but it still allows you to fairly easily create close to best in slot items for a build. One nice thing about the system is because in the end game you only want to craft on exalted items, items with tier 6 or tier 7 stats that you cannot otherwise get. You don't really need to pick up rare items once you get to endgame. You only need to get exalted items. I pretty much pick up every single exalted item and store it in case I want to use it for later on. And they also serve a different purpose for endgame, where you can take these exalted items and actually put them on legendary items, such as these boots. But it does make it a lot easier than having to pick up a billion yellows like in PoE, identify all of them, and see if any of them are good enough to use. You simply just need to look at the exalted item, see if you like the stat on it that's exalted, and if it is, pick it up, craft something with it. If you just like the item because it seems interesting, like the scythe, pick it up, put it somewhere, and maybe use it to make a build later on. The other portion of crafting we should discuss is legendary potential and its impact on endgame items. What legendary potential is if you take an item like this to Temporal Sanctum, you are able to sacrifice another item, and the legendary potential will steal a certain amount of stats off of the item and permanently put it on the legendary item. So one example are my boots. If you look at the pink text on these boots originally had 2 legendary potential. Once I finished my Temporal Sanctum run, I sacrificed a pair of boots with these boots, and it ended up stealing both of the life rolls off of the boots and permanently put them on this item. So an example with this death rattle might be, I want to take some amulets. Now, mind you, this can only be done with the purple amulets, which is another reason to hoard a million different purple items in case you ever need specific purple items for a build. But what my goal here is I'm going to craft all of these amulets and I'm going to find the nicest one that I like. And then I'm simply just going to delete it effectively, right? The game incentivizes you with legendary potential to craft really good, really insane items you'd want to use and then sacrifice them to legendary items, which delete it and take a stat. So this amulet would need to have 4 stats on it. But if I sacrifice in Temporal Sanctum of my Death Rattle, it could take any of the 4 stats and permanently put on here. So ideally, I'd like the minion damage to be permanently put on my Death Rattle, but it is completely random what it'll take. Items can also have 2, 3, and even 4 legendary potential. And just imagine how strong a 4 legendary potential item would be. For example, if I had a 4 legendary potential belt, I could take every stat on my current belt and put it on that belt. That effectively means I'm wearing 2 belts. Thing is, legendary potential is rare. The more legendary potential, and especially the harder the item is to get, the less legendary potential you'll see. So a fairly common low-level item, for example, like a tabula from PoE, you could see 1 legendary potential pretty often. You'll see 2 rarely. 3 might be super lucky, and 4 would be the same thing as getting a Mage Blood. In comparison, if we use the Mage Blood, for example, a 1 legendary Mage Blood might be obscenely rare as it is. and anything past it might be winning like the universal lottery. That is a way for the game to be able to balance different items to still be relevant. That allows all the low level items to still be relevant at high ends and allows all the high end items to not be super overpowered simply because you can't get infinite legendary potential on them. Even a legendary that's not necessarily too strong can immediately be made extremely strong with 2 or 3 legendary potential on it. So if you think about PoE, how many unique items in PoE kind of don't really do much because they're not very strong? Well, in this game, if you have a unique item that has a insane build defining effect on it, but the rest of the stats aren't very good, well, if you get one with legendary potential, you can suddenly make it really good by putting your desired stats directly on the item. This can allow for some very, very silly items in endgame, but also gives you something to aspire for. Now, those kind of items are the super insane endgame items for this game that might be your end of season projects to make, or it might be your goals for the whole season to potentially make a insane legendary item. One good example of where legendary potential would actually make a massive difference is Prism Wraps on this Fireball Cast on Crit Meteor character. Prism Wraps in this build is effectively best in slots because it's a critical strike chance chest plates where this build is trying to stack a lot of critical strike chance, proc as many Harbingers of Stars as possible, 8% chance to cast the meteor on crit if above 0 mana. And the nice thing about this is the way I stay alive on this character is Twisted Hearts of what's his face. 14% of current health converted to ward when you use an elemental spell. So if you look at my fireballs, you can see that every time I press fireball, there's a little bit of life, but I gain ward. That ward is based on my current health, so I always want to have my health pool maxed out. What Prism Wraps does that effectively makes it best in slot for this specific build is the 8% elemental damage leeches life on crit. That is a massive number. And since I'm basically always critting, this chestplate is unreplaceable. It also has 30% less elemental damage. Everything about this item is great. My only complaint is that on a chestplate, I can get plus levels to Fireball, which is very important for my builds. And I could also get Intelligence, which is also very important for my build as an Intelligence stacker because of this offhand. And I'm missing life. As you can see, my life is a little bit lower. Since this is percent of current health, the more life I have, well, the more word I can effectively keep up, which makes me even tankier. So if I were to able to get a 2 or 3 legendary potential Prism Wrap, this item would become absolutely insane. It's already good enough to where even though it's technically kind of garbage, I'm still wearing this in a super endgame build with no alternatives to it. The nice thing is a level 5 item, so getting high legendary potential if I were to go farm a bunch of Prism Wraps is pretty easy. This allows a low level, potentially powerful item to suddenly not only be best in slot, but be best in slot and be extremely good in terms of the stats on it. For the end of this video, I want to give a little bit of a demonstration on how we would potentially go about crafting a amulet to go run Temporal Sanctum with and destroy to use up the legendary potential on this death rattle. So for this amulet, my ideal stats are going to be either minion damage, which I only unfortunately have one amulet with minion damage on it. Minion life would be okay too. And then any sort of resistance or life that would help me be tankier. If we look at my current stats, I have absolutely no void resistance. I do have a plan to fix this, but I would not mind getting void resistance from one of these amulets. So I'm okay with rolling that as a suffix. I need a little bit of elemental resistance. I have another plan to fix this later, but I want to see what happens with this amulet first. And I need a little bit of necrotic. So I have 3 amulets, which I am somewhat hopeful that they're going to end up well. I don't have much hope for this one, unfortunately, since it only has 23 forging potential. It unfortunately rolled pretty low. But I am pretty hopeful on these 2. They have decent forging potential, especially this one, and it has a lot of health. Health for this build is everything. So if I can stay alive better, then this minion build will be able to perform even better. If all 3 of these fail, I do have 3 backups, which I'm not too hopeful are going to end up very decent, but Worst case scenario, we have a few more amulets to attempt this with. Whenever you want to make an item for legendary potential sake, you do want to have a big stockpile. So, for example, for me, I simply just went through my stash and looked at every single stash that had an amulet in it and just quickly sorted through them to see which ones looked decent. I either wanted a good defensive stat or a good offensive stat, and then somewhat decent other stats on it to make it work. So, one good example of a bad item would be this, which would be a little bit difficult to work with since both of the prefixes are things I don't really need or want. So if I want to get something good, we're gonna have to hope that we get lucky and re-roll into it. A good example might be something like this, where I'm okay with the physical resistance. I want the mini damage. I'm okay re-rolling one stat, and then we have an open suffix, so it's a little bit easier to forcefully make the item into what we want it to be. So one other thing to mention, which I very briefly mentioned earlier, are the runes of creation. So let's assume this item was perfect the way it was. If it still had a little bit of forging potential left, and if I really like this item, I can use up the forging potential on Runes of Creation, which will give me a copy of it. That means I will have another attempt at using that item as a sacrifice if I were to get another death rattle. You really do not want to use these. These are very rare and you want to keep them for very, very, very endgame items. And you certainly don't want to waste it when you're attempting a one legendary potential item. But if you really want something that is easy to get high legendary potential on, and you want two attempts at a 2LP or 3LP version of it, then definitely use Runes of Creation. So let's start with this. Now we have one immediate problem with this amulet. The fire penetration is tier 5. So the only things I could really do here is I could use a Rune of Removal and 1 in 3 pray that the fire penetration is removed. That is the only thing I could do here. A tier 5 stack cannot be changed anyway. I can't chaos it, for example. I can't really do anything to it. So if I want to use this amulet, all I can really do is attempt to maybe reroll the resistance to hope that something decent comes out of it, or just leave that on there and just put another suffix and just be happy with whatever happens. I think we're actually going to save this amulet for later. Let's start with this one. I think this one has a decent amount of hope. So if we go to view materials and look at prefixes, these are all the prefixes that can roll on a amulet. The only things that are really useful for me here, unfortunately, we don't get to see weightings, so it's mostly just guesswork on how rare something is going to be minion damage, which I know is pretty common, and minion life. I'd be okay with mana, I guess. I don't really use mana in this build, but it's something if I get it or chance to find potions. Every other stat is completely useless and does not help me in any meaningful way at all. Other than maybe for a gain on potion use. That's very, very tiny. So what I think we're going to be doing is we are going to Glyph of Chaos both of these and see what they turn into. And we're just going to pray that something decent happens. Again, I don't have many good amulets, so it's going to be a little bit hard to make something truly insane out of these. And then for a suffix, I think my plan is to potentially put Void on here. Chance to shred armor and chance to apply frailty are very good, but I cannot apply them as a minion build. I don't really attack. So I have no reason to put them on here. Health regeneration is pointless for me. I'm not a health regen build. Dodge rating is kind of useless. I think I'd prefer just put a resistance on here to be resistance capped. I wouldn't mind putting elemental to be done with my elemental resistances, or a little bit of void to help, or poison to finish my poison resistance off. But let's start with the prefixes. So let's see what happens. We're just going to send it, and hopefully this 1 to 18 doesn't hit 18 and we lose all of our forging potential. One thing for this is we do need luck on low rolling all of the clicks because we want to do quite a lot of clicks, especially this amulet. So if we just hit 18 into 18, then we'll be at like 2 forging potential and this amulet's basically worthless. So first click, crit multi doesn't really do anything for us. Only use +4, so that's pretty decent. We can go again and see what happens because there really isn't anything else we can do here. I would have potentially left this at tier 4 and used a Glyph of Despair towards the end to attempt to remove it and forcefully put a prefix I have, but I don't have any left. So all we can really do is just Glyph of Chaos again. And we got necrotic penetration, which is kind of useless. We only got -8, which is something. We can go again. So we did get minion life. I guess I'd be okay with minion life. That's fine. It's something. My minion doesn't really die, but more minion life would be nice simply because of the way my build works and the fact that my minion takes a lot of damage over time. If I looked at my stats, I would say I think I want to go for resistances first, elemental resistances. I don't have as good of a plan to fix this. I have a way to get 75% void resistance instantly, so that's not a problem. And this poison resistance can just be fixed with an idol later or with a different craft on some other piece of gear. So let's finish up this with some elemental resistance. Now we want to use Glyphs of Hope here every time because this just gives us a chance to not do anything with the forging potential. And hopefully this doesn't use 18. We need to get a little bit lucky to potentially get tier 5 resistance. I don't need tier 5 resistance here to be able to resistance cap. Even this is +6, which is not enough. But if it gets like tier 3, that should be enough for me to resistance cap. That did use -13, so we're down to 5. So we have to pray that it doesn't use everything, or we have to hope we get lucky with hope. Nice, we got lucky with hope, so that didn't use anything. We can go again. -5, and this amulet is done. It is 12, which is decent enough. So I have 3 stats on this amulet. That'd be okay if it goes on this death rattle. We have the minion health. We have the flat life, which I really want, and the elemental resistance. We really don't want the penetration because that does absolutely nothing for me. Let's do this one next. So the same thing here. I really like the life. I think we'll just put elemental resistance as a suffix, and we just need to reroll the prefixes. We have a lot of forging potential, so we have a lot of hope here. So let's start by rerolling these and pray that we get something good. Unfortunately, that used up a lot of forging potential. We just go again, see what happens, necrotic damage, do it here as well, full damage, and mana. And unfortunately, that ate up all of our forging potential. This kind of got very unlucky. It does need 4 stats as well to be forged. So one thing I could have maybe potentially done there is applied a suffix first, especially if I had a chance for a critical to happen, then it might have hit the elemental resistant got a free level up. But this amulet is effectively dead now. It's just completely useless. I don't really see a reason to attempt this one. It doesn't, I would want life on here since this does not have life. And the physical resistance is low. I guess we can quickly try. We just send it. We don't really have to think too much of it. We just put life and just upgrade a bunch. We want to get at least tier 5. We do tier 5. We could do tier 5. And I think I want to reroll the physical resistance. I don't have a way to reduce my physical resistance to make use of this. I think we just double send on the chaos and see what happens. Cold resistance is not the most useful. I think we just go one more time to see. Actually, yeah, cold resistance is not very useful. I'm only missing 1%. I could very easily just get a slightly better idol to get that 1% I'm missing. Because in this game, we don't need to be overcapped, realistically. Well, we actually end up getting elemental resistance. So this amulet kind of got saved. We now have minion damage, a decent life roll, and elemental resistance. So we now have 2 potential outcomes. One with minion health, one with minion damage. So I'd much rather actually do this one than to go with this one, even though the life roll is a little bit better. I don't really actually see a reason to attempt these other ones, especially since it'd be, for example, this one. I don't have a good way to remove this, and I want life on here. It'd still be fine with elemental resistance. This only has 1 attempt at minion damage. Minion life would be okay, but not ideal. I don't think there's a reason to attempt to craft that one. For this one, same thing. Tier 4, tier 3. This might be a little bit hard to turn to minion life. And this is a completely dead stat, so we can't really do anything with this. This would be another 1 in 3 at, sorry, a 1 in 3 at a good stat, and then a 1 in 4 at a bad stat. But very low chance at this hitting. I guess we can hit it because this is such low forging potential. It'd be hard to turn into an amulet for any sort of other build. So we could quickly double chaos this and maybe we get super lucky. We didn't get super lucky and said 0, so this is a pretty dead amulet as it is. And then for this one, it's just the same thing. It's, turning use something good is very hard. I don't need necrotic resistance. I have 1 attempt at it. This is tier 7 elemental resistance. I don't really need that much. While it'd be nice, I really don't need it. So we just stop here and we just go with one of these. And I think I'd rather go with the minion damage one versus the raw health one. Okay, so now that we have finished our run of Temporal Sanctum, I can go back in time to like present day. And then in the Eternity Cache, I simply put the item I wish to add a stat to, and then I add the item I wish to sacrifice. So we're going to sacrifice this and we're going to pray that it does not hit the fire penetration. We seal the cache, we go forward in time, and then we open it and we pray it's good. And we got the 80 life, which I'm pretty happy with. Now the legendary potential is permanently gone, and the 80 health is permanently attached to my death rattle. That's all there is to it. I really enjoyed crafting this game. It's allowed me to make quite a lot of really good items that I felt very good about. It's given me the dopamine rush when I get decently lucky with Glyphs of Hope, and it allows me to make a really sick item. And I've liked the simplicity of it. I've liked that I haven't had to sit here and spam 25,000 alterations like I did last season in PoE to make a mirror tier belt. Everyone who I've told about the system has been pretty positive about it. Everyone who I've seen interact with this has loved it. And I think it's a really good intermediary between a non existent crafting system like in Diablo and a super, super in depth and extreme crafting system like in PoE. That is all I have to say for crafting. I really hope this video made it a lot simpler to understand and answered any questions you have. If you do have more crafting questions, feel free to ask in the comments or feel free to come by my stream and ask me directly. I have no problems trying to answer any sort of question you have. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope to see you guys in the next video.